So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are streaming from. This is the East Central and South Africa Microsoft Excel Forum, brought to you by Crisp Excel Training and Consulting. We are corporate and individual trainers on all this, and we're also consultants on data management and analytics. These are our partners in Kenya and outside Kenya. Today, I am the one who is presenting. My name is Chris Pomwangi. I'm an Excel MVP. My areas of expertise is data management, data analysis, and corporate training. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Send you my social media handles. You can follow me also on YouTube. I have a couple of videos that can help you. I've written a book. The only book you need to do good in Excel is called Excel with Power Query and ChatGPT. So my topic of today is data. So the topic of today is data validation, and the question is, what is data validation and why is data validation important to an Excel user or to any data analyst or data scientist? They say that over 80% of data analysis is spent cleaning data. So you can imagine, like, if you are going to do a 2 hour, if you're going to do data analysis for 2 hours, you spend over an hour plus just for cleaning data. So the essence of why you should be able to learn and to implement data validation is it is going to save you a lot of time. Not only that, it's going to increase the data quality that you are going to get at the end of the day. So if you want to ensure that the data that you're analyzing is consistent, accurate, valid, complete, unique, and all other traits of high data quality. So why data validation? So I did see a lot, a very interesting post. It's called How to Elevate Your Data Analytics by Fixing These Top 5 Data Quality Mistakes. And this is what he said. I often hear people saying we need to clean data or we should transform it into something usable. But before you even think of cleaning data or transforming it or visualizing it, the question that you should think of is how can you prevent that data from being collected from the very first time? And that is where data analytics or data validation comes in. Using data validation, you can be able to fix the issue of duplicate data, not outdated data, but incomplete data. And I'm going to show you this, how to fix inaccurate data from being collected. So for me, and maybe somebody is going to differ with me, I believe that of all the data science or data scientist skills that you need to have, the basis of all the skills is data validation, because that is where you can be able to ensure that whatever that you are going to collecting, that whatever data that you're going to collect is clean and is usable and is going to help you. So before you even learn about data engineering, visualizing AI and all that, and all these are good skills to have, if you can be able to master data validation, all the other skills will be able to save a lot of time doing everything else that is required to make your data usable. So we go straight to that worksheet. So the question is, where do you find data validation in Excel? So data validation is found under data, and then you come to data tools, and then this is where it is data validation. But for this webinar, I'm not going to follow all that because I'll be going back and forth. There's a shortcut for getting into data validation, and it's Alt AVV. So when it comes to inbuilt rules, We have a whole number, and I'll show you how you can do whole numbers and the difference between a whole number and a decimal number, how to use lists, how to use dates, uh, date and time. As we all know that a date is nothing more but a number, and a time is nothing more but a fraction of 24 hours. How you can validate against text length. And what makes data validation actually very powerful is the use of custom functions, which we are going to see. So as I said, input message is where you give the user a hint of what they are supposed to input, and it usually shows when a user clicks on the field that they are going to enter data, it shows what you have already shown. And then the error alerts, as I told you, the stop. This is how it shows. This is the default alert, and it blocks users from entering data. When you put stop, you can't enter any data. Warning, it discourages the entry of invalid data, but you are giving the user an option where they can be able to ignore it and continue. And then information, it just announces that the data that you have inputted is invalid, and somebody can just continue and go on. Okay. So when you um, when you want to copy, when you're copying a cell, you can copy a cell with data validation, or you can copy a cell without data validation. And we are going to see all this. I'm assuming this is the basics, so that's why I'm flashing. And also, when you want to clear data validation, you need to select, you need to go to data validation, that is Alt A V, and then you see all the rules here, and then you can clear everything here if you want to go back to unvalidated fields. But anyway, we are going to see all that in a minute. So let's move into something that is more interesting. So those are the rules and where to find data validation. So I want us to see how we can be able to use the inbuilt rules. So this is data that you need to collect about your suppliers. There's the quantity, there's the price, there's the product, the delivery date, and the driver's code. And all these you need to have rules that somebody needs to follow for them to enter data. So the first rule says that as for the quality, you are only allowing whole numbers, anything that is greater than 1. So a whole number is anything that is greater, actually can be a 0, but anything that is greater than 1 is a whole number. So how do you ensure that whatever that is input in this column is a whole number? Highlight the area that you want the cells that you want to validate. Go to data validation at AVV. Then you come and say you want a whole number. And the whole number can be between something, that's the maximum and the minimum. It can be not between a certain range. It can be equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than, greater or less than, and less than equal. So it's up to you to decide what kind of whole numbers do you want to allow. For us, we just need to allow any whole number. So any whole number is anything that is greater than 1. So anything that is greater than 1 is a whole number. And then you can come to the alerts. You say you don't want any decimals on the quantity. Then on the title you say no decimals. And then on the error message you say enter whole numbers. So if I try to come and enter a whole number, it will accept. If I try to enter a decimal, it will not accept. Yeah. So now if you want decimals, if you want numbers, whole numbers and decimals, you come to using decimals. So what the second rule says, for the price, decimals are allowed, but you can only do a price for up to $300. So the same thing, highlight Alt A V V, come to the setting and say I want decimals, and what is the maximum that you want? Anything that is less than $350, but it should include decimals. So if I come here and I say 25.6, it will accept. If I say 351.5, it doesn't accept because we said we have restricted the maximum price that we can input is 350, but I can do up to 349.99999. Yeah. So that's the if you want whole numbers and decimals, then don't use whole number, use decimals, because decimals accept a whole number and it can accept a whole number and a decimal. Yeah. So that's the difference between whole numbers and decimals. So the next rule is only approved. Sometimes you want people to pick from a list. The products that these suppliers can supply is only what the management has approved, and you have a list of approved products. Basically, I won't encourage you to put it in the same workbook. So if you can create a different workbook and hide it, that would be good. But for the sake of this trainings, I'm going to put it here. So I want people to only pick whatever that is in this workbook. And the secret is when you are creating a list, and I'll show you why, the list should always be in a table, but we'll get there. So this is how you validate against a list. Select the cells, Alt A, V and V. So when you're here, you say, I want to validate against a list, and it will ask you where your source data is. And you can highlight that, enter. Okay. So as you can see, a person can only select the validated products. So now the question is, if tomorrow the board approves for desk and chairs, as you can see, they are not available here. But if your approved list is a table, what you can do, you can just add it, and you can see when you add data into a table, it expands to accommodate that data. And the beauty about it is that that data now shows up in your drop-down list, in your validated drop-down list. So every time you are creating a drop-down list, ensure that drop-down list is a table, because you can be able to remove, say tomorrow the furniture has been excluded from the approved list. I can come and delete furniture. So if I come to my list, it won't show furniture. So this is a good way to control what shows and what doesn't show from your data without affecting where the users are inputting, collecting your data. So we'll see more about tables and how you can create cascading tables, but that's how you do lists. So the next thing is we are told that the delivery date should be within the 10 days from today. So whatever today this is, you cannot deliver more than 10 days. So how do you ensure that the delivery date is 10 days from today? It's the same repetitive action. So highlight where you want to validate data, Alt A, V, and V. And then you come, you say, I want a date. So the date is, what's the start date? The beauty about it here is that you can put today's date if you want it to be static, or you can put a formula. The formula is equals to today. And then, so the start date should always be today, but when is the end date? It can only be supplied today plus 10 days. So you can come and say equals today plus 10 days. So anything that is beyond 10 days from today, these cells cannot accept that data. Add AVP. Can you be able to see this data validation
Yeah,
screen now?
yeah, it's popping up.
Okay. Sorry for that. We have not gone so far. I think I can go back and explain. So we were talking about. Actually, now that we are here, let me clear the rules. So that's how you can clear the rules from cells that have data validation. So now we want to validate against the dates, and it will say that the dates should be within 10 days from today. So how do you do that? You press Alt A, V, and V. That's the shortcut. You come to dates, and then the start date, as I said, it can be a static date. You can write 8 31st 2024, or if you want it to be dynamic. And the problem with today is that it's volatile, it changes every day. So you can just do today as a start date, and when is the end date is today plus 10 days. So equals today plus 10. So any date that is greater than today plus um, 10 days won't work. So let's do today. It should accept. What if the delivery date was supposed to be today plus maybe 13 days? So it's going to give that error. So for the days, it's the same thing. Since a date is nothing more but a number, the same criteria that you use for numbers can also be used for dates. Dates that are between, dates that are not between. Let's say you don't want people to deliver of a Christmas holiday or some certain holiday. You can say don't do between this, do between this date, do anything that is greater than today, less than today. As long as you remember that a date is nothing but a number, you can apply these rules and these criteria when validating against dates. And the same thing that you can do with time. Uh, for the sake of time, I won't show you how to validate against time, but it's the same. Time and dates are nothing but a number. So you can say we don't want delivery to be done after 6 p.m. or it can only be done between 1 and 3. So you can do and you come and you validate against uh, whatever time you want to be collected. So now, in case you receive data, you won't receive data that has long delivery days and the long delivery times. So the next thing is validating against the text length, and we are told that the driver code should have a maximum of 7 digits. So uh, looks like I had done. Let me clear that. It's the same thing. The inbuilt rules, the beauty about them is that they have, you just select the rule and then you do the criteria. I want the code to be, recommended length is 7 days. So I can say equal to 7. If you try to input a driver code less than 7 digits, it won't accept. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't accept. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now it will accept that driver's code. And this, I'll show you how you can even validate against how do you want this driver code to be? Do you want it to start with something and it ends with something? And how do you want these 7 digits to be spread? How many numbers? How many letters? How many symbols and all that? But that will be later on. So we talked about list, but there's something that is called a cascading list. And a cascading list, for example, and I'll show you, is I have the counties, the sub-counties, and the wards in Kenya. So if you belong to Mombasa County, let's say I've selected your county to be Mombasa County, you can only belong to these sub-counties. Yeah. And if you belong to Likoni sub-county, you can only belong to these wards. And you can think of how you want that data to be validated. So if I select Mombasa, I cannot be able to select anything else here. I can only be able to select the sub-counties that belong to Mombasa. If I select Likoni, I can only select sub-counties that belong to Likoni. So I have done this a full 1 hour plus webinar that was done by Cecilia. If I can show. So I'll not repeat that. I'll send you the workbook. So she did a very good job, 1 hour and 32 minutes, tackling all the tricks and tips on how to do dynamic drop-down list. So what I'll show you is just a simple thing that I had done. So I had created the name ranges. So Stephen belongs to Mombasa. Let's see whether, as you can see, I can only select the sub-counties that belong to Mombasa. So if I select something like Kwale, again, only the sub-counties that belong to Kwale. So this is a very good way of validating data so that you don't have data mixed up and then you have to come cleaning it up and trying to look up that kind of thing, which is a waste of time. So let me say Mombasa. So Mombasa, I've selected Kisauni. Kisauni, I don't have any sub-counties. I don't have any wards, as you can see. The only wards that I have is for Likoni. So if I select Likoni, you can see now I can be able to see the wards. Yeah. And then you can do as many cascading drop-down lists as possible. So because this has been covered again by this Excel MVP, I'll send you this workbook and the link. If you are interested in creating this kind of data and even more complicated cascading drop-down lists, I would urge you to come and see this free webinar. So for today, you have to forgive me because there's a lot to cover. I'll skip that and I'll send you this and you can come and watch at your own free time. So now this is where it starts getting interesting, because now after using the inbuilt rules, we can be able now to use custom functions. Okay, so one of the things that makes data to lose its quality is duplicates. So the question is, how do you ensure uniqueness in data? For example, you have again this supplier, you want to collect data for suppliers and you want to know that the ID code should be unique. Don't put an ID code and then later on repeat that ID code. So how do you ensure that data is unique? So when it comes to, let me highlight Control A, V, and V. before I give you the rules of creating a custom function. So you come to rules, but you select custom, and it will allow you to select to create a formula. So here are the rules when you are creating that formula. The formula that you are going to go back. The formula that you are going to use has to be a logical formula. So I don't know how many of you know the Excel logic and logical test. A logical test in Excel is any test that can only evaluate to true and false. Yeah, so whatever formula that you're going to put here, at the end of the day, it has to evaluate into either true or false. If you have, if you don't know so much about Excel logic and logical functions, I have done a 1-hour webinar, and I'm not going to repeat. And it's here. You can come and do. You can come and watch these 42 minutes on what it means to have logic and Excel and logical functions in Excel. But basically, is any formula that you are going to input in the custom function, it has to evaluate to either true or false. So the next rule is before you, and if you follow these rules, you have the best time when you are doing data validation. Before you type your data, your formula here, it's good to test your formula first somewhere else, and then you copy and you paste it here. If it is working on your worksheet, it will also work on data validation. The only thing, again, you need to remember is that data validation does not accept array constants, but we are going to see that later on. So how do you ensure that something is unique? You ensure that something is unique. If you count it, it won't be able, you can only, if you count something in a list or in a range, and the answer is 1, then that thing is unique. Anything greater than 1, that means it's not unique. So I'll do my testing of the formula. So I can come and do it here. You can say, sorry, let me do it here. So count if, what are you counting? I'm going to count all the data because all my IDs will be in column C. Everything that is in column C, and then I want to count what I've input in cell C3. You see, it's equals to 1, but since I need to have a logical test as a formula, I'll say equals to 1. So anything that is equal to 1 is unique. So in case I come and I put another 1, 2, 3 here, as you can see, is false. So data validation will only validate anything that results into a true. In case I delete it, then it will return a true. Now that I know that my formula is working, I can just come and copy that formula, Control C, escape, highlight, Alt A, V and V, custom function, paste it, okay. That simple thing can help you to, can save you a lot of time for that you're going to use when validating data and all that. Sorry, or removing duplicates and checking for duplicates in your data, the data that was collected. So let's see whether I can be able to. I'll enter something else. 589. Let's see whether I can be able to enter 589 again. That's it. So a very simple formula, but it will save you hours and hours of collecting invalid data and hours of cleaning and removing duplicate data. So how do you, all you need to know is ensure that your logic is correct. How do you tell something is unique? If it is counted in a range, it is equals to 1. Okay. So the second thing is that we are told that the course code should not have spaces. So whatever that you are going to put here in the course code, don't have spaces. So how do you ensure that? Let me have this cell. We are going to test our formula here before we paste it in data validation. So how do you ensure that whatever that you are going to input in these fields do not have spaces? Is if you substitute space, I'll put a space. If I remove a space from this data, it should be equal to that data without a space. So if I say substitute what in this text, if I remove a space and the new text is nothing, so this is how my data will look like without a space. So now the question I need, and you see this is not a logical test. So I need something in this cell that says true and false. So what are we comparing this with? We are comparing this data that doesn't have a space with the data that the user has already input. So it tells you it's true. No, it is not true that whatever that the user has input has a what? A space. So in case I remove this space, you can see now it's true. So the whole idea is when you are creating functions for data validation is that you have to get this logical test very, very, very clear. If you can be able to get this logical test clear, and we are going to cover that in the next 20 minutes, then you have a free ride when it comes to data validation. So this is the formula that we need to copy. Escape. So let me try to enter something a space. I won't accept. If I want to enter something without a space, there it is. So when creating custom functions, and I'll repeat again, the only important thing that you need, the only trick that you need to do is what's your logical test, and can you be able to create that logical test using a formula? And we are going to get into something a bit complicated, and we are still going to show you how to test for completeness, but that will be later on. So the next thing that we need to do is, and this is a bit complicated, but I'll show you how you can be able to do it. We want to validate against, not validate valid emails. So what is a valid email? It's an email that has the @ sign. It has the dot something. It has to have a dot something. It doesn't have a space, and it doesn't have a comma. So the formula that you are going to validate these cells is it has to have all these. So has a sign, has a dot, no space, no comma. So that the data that you are going to collect is consistent with what your company has agreed upon. So here is how you can be able to create this kind of a function. So you need to, again, your logical test, you need to ensure that you check what, don't try to combine everything at once. If you can be able to break down your logic into small bits and pieces, that will help you when you are creating your logical function. And we are going to break it down. So we are going to check, does it have an @ sign and a dot first? And then number two, we are going to check whatever that is going to be input here, does it not have a space and a comma? So let's start with how to find an @ sign and a dot. What I said is that you can be able to do this find. I see people using array constants like this. So what we are trying to find is @ sign and a decimal, where we are trying to find it wherever here is. Let me put principal at G. And you can see we have 7 and 11. That means it has an @ sign and it has a decimal. Okay, but this formula, and again, this is not a logical test. So how do we make this a logical test? Since we are saying it has to have an @ and a decimal, we need to come here and say, first of all, we say, is it a number? So it's true. So now we have two true, but we only need one result. So how do we combine this? We know that it has to have an @ sign and a decimal. So we just come here and say, use the AND function. So now we have one result, yeah. But this won't work in data validation, and the reason why it won't work in data validation is because we have this array constant. So the question is, how do you handle multiple checks in data validation? And this is where the fstack function comes in, because you can come and say equals fstack. I want to fstack the decimal, and I want to fstack the @ sign. Okay. So now I can be able to use that fstack. I can be able to nest that fstack in find. So now find what? Find these two within whatever that is on that cell. Okay, it's giving me the same thing. And then check if it is a number, because at the end of the day, we need to create a logical test. Set a number. Yeah. And then we only need one result. So we come and say, use the add logic, because the two needs to be true for it to be anything else. If one of, let me show you why we need to have, why we are going to use the AND formula. In case my email has the @ sign, but it doesn't have a dot, it will tell me that is false because it needs to have both the at and the dot. Okay, so that is correct. Whatever we have noted here is correct. So the next thing that we need to check is we don't have space and we don't have a comma, and we are going to use the same formula. So we are going to say find. What are we finding? We want to fit stack space, and you also want to have a comma. So check for me space and a comma. Within what text? Within this text. So it doesn't have a space and a comma. Let's see if I put a space somewhere, what will happen? Yes, it has a space. So this email is not valid because it has a space. So the same thing we do is number. So now we have true and false, but we want to check if any of the two is present, then do not do what? Do not validate that email. So the logic that we are going to use is all. If you find either a space or a comma, then do not validate that email. Okay. So now, how do you combine the two? This is a trick. I don't know where I learned it, but if you are going to create a complex formula, what you need to do, you need to copy it on the clipboard. So I'll open my clipboard and I'll clear everything. So I want this, Control C, copy it on the clipboard, escape, and I want this also. Control C, copy it on the clipboard. And then now I want to combine the two because it's the two test that is going to ensure that I have a valid email. So I come and say equals and what's the first logical test? Check if it has, check that it doesn't have a space and a comma. What is the second logical test? Check that it has a decimal and an at sign. That's it. So now this is the formula that I'm going to copy. You can't create this formula in data validation. So that's why the first step is you should be able to test your formula first before you paste it on in your data validation custom function. So I've copied that. I can close my clipboard, highlight, Alt A, V, and V, and say custom. Then I come and I paste it. So let's do some testing. A at j.com or .co. I don't know why it's refusing. Give me a minute. A at j.com. Let me put it here and see why. Let's see whether it's valid. Why would they say it's not valid? It has an sign. Give me a minute. So this happens often when you are doing data validation. So because if you're, I'm not supposed to use the all. This is the problem, because I'm saying it can have one of the two. It can have a space or it can have a comma, which is not true. It should not have both a space and a comma. Yeah. So yes, it's true. It doesn't have. It has an assign and a decimal, and this is where the part of the logic that is wrong is that we need to say not. Because it should not have a space and a comma. So now if we come and have that is where we are getting it all wrong. So not and then add. Yeah. So now this is a valid email. So let us clear that and create our formula all over again. Home, clipboard, clear. So copy, Control C, enter, and then what we had forgotten is the not, because we are looking for space and comma, but what we are supposed to do is not to have a space and a comma. Control C. So now we combine the two, we come and say is equals, and it should not have a space and a comma, and it should have a dot and an @ sign. So now this will work. So copy your formula, escape, highlight the area you want to validate, clear, and then let me paste. So let's test our formula. So I'll say a@j.com. So this has everything. Yeah, it's working. So let me do something else. I say a at space j.com. Since this email has a space, it should not be able. I wonder why it's accepting. Sorry. Yeah, it should be false. Yeah, formula is showing us is false. Did we not validate from E3? Let me check. This is the problem. It's starting to validate from J9, but it should start validating from. So these are some of the mistakes that you are going to make when you are validating data. Always start validating from the first cell. So our first cell is E3. So our first cell is E3. So let me copy this. And it's good that trees are making these mistakes so that in case you find these mistakes when you're validating data, don't get scared. If you know that your logic is correct, maybe what you are missing is your cell references. So let's do that all over again. Clear. Paste, and we are referencing from E3, which is our first cell. So let's see, a at j.com. .co, that should accept, and then a at space j.com. Yes. So that's where we are messing up. So things to learn: get your cell references correct. Always, when you are validating data, ensure that the cell that starts here is the initial cell. And then ensure that your logic is correct. So those are the two mistakes that we are making. And it's already 5. So give me like another 15 minutes. I'll show you something interesting. So those are the things that you need to do. Test your formula first on a worksheet before you paste it on data validation, and ensure that the logic that you are using is correct. And do not use array constants. If you have to use an array constant, consider using vstack instead of an array constant. Okay. So the question is, how do you ensure? This is something that Aditya on LinkedIn said that it cannot be done using data validation. How do you ensure that you cannot enter data like the second row and the third row if everything on the row is not completed? Let's assume that this cell and this cell and this cell are complete. And it's also a very simple formula. All you need to do is ensure that you count blank, but the blank that you're counting is that if there's any blank in the previous cell, yeah, like our previous cell here is from B2 to E2. If there's any blank in these cells, then do not allow data to be input in the other cells. Okay. So currently, I can be able to input data here. I can ignore this. I can skip the ID, but I can come and put another supplier and all that. But you are not supposed to add another supplier if you have not keyed in data on all the required fields on the first supplier. So this simple formula is going to ensure that your data is complete, and it's going to ensure that the previous row is completed. So this is what we are going to do. We're just coming to copy this logical test, and we are going to add it in our current, sorry. So I'll copy that. And I'll come and say out AVP. Sorry. I'll just validate it against the ID, but you need to go and validate against all the other fields. Let me say that the ID field is the required field. So out A, P, and V. So now we have this count for the uniqueness, but I also want to ensure that it's a required field. So come and I say and. So check for uniqueness and then check for completeness. Okay. So let's see whether it works. So my ID is 1, 2, 3. And so if I do 1, 2, 3, no, actually, that is not a good test. If I do 4, 5, 6, it's supposed to accept because it's unique. But if I have some missing data on the first row and I do 4, 5, 6, it does not accept. So why does it not accept? Because it's looking at the previous row and it's saying this row is not complete. So you cannot be able, although the ID is unique, you cannot be able to add another ID if you have not completed whatever that is on the previous row. So this simple formula will help you to ensure that the data that you are collecting is complete. You can be able to create required fields in Excel using the count blank of either the previous cell or the previous row. Okay. Nick, I think we are out of time. I don't know whether people want us to continue or I hope we are learning something about how to ensure that your data is unique, valid, consistent, and complete. Okay. So we want to do, I'll just cover this, I'll not go to the others. This is something that it also happens, especially if you are in HR. You have a table, you have your job, the job and the salary ranges. Okay, the job grade and the salary ranges. So any person with grade 1, grade 2, grade can, as many job grades that you have, you are not supposed to award somebody less than this minimum salary. If, for example, if an employee is in grade 3, the minimum that you can assign them is 58,000 and the maximum is 70,282. We are listening again this time, but I'll repeat. G3 to G7. And then F3, F7. And then it should be absolute. It should always be referencing that G3. And this should always be referencing that area. And then the only thing that should be relative is C3. So that's the first formula that we need to copy. And then The only thing that is going to change here is that it should be looking at the maximum. So let's copy this, escape, out A, V, and V. So the salary, we want that salary to be a whole number, and a whole number between what? A whole number between the minimum, which is going to be a lookup using sum if, and the maximum. And now the only thing that we need to change here is that we know the maximum are in column H, not column G, but column H. And that's it. So that simple thing would help you to ensure that your employees' salaries are not awarded based on feelings or anything, but is following the job, a great job distribution and salary grades. So if I try to give this person a salary that is below their grade, 50,000, they won't agree because 50,000 is not within this grade, within this salary scale. So what if I give them 60,000? 60,000, yes, is between this grade. So let's do 5. So 5, since 5 is my friend, I'll try to give them 700,000. I won't agree because 700,000 is above the job grade. So if I give them 420,000, and it can be, yeah, so that one is accepting because it's within the salary grades. So that is how you can be able to use the inbuilt you can be able to use the inbuilt formulas, the inbuilt rules, and then use formulas to make them more powerful. So you are not restricted to key in static data. You can be able to use lookups. You can be able to do any other formula that is here. The beauty about the formulas that you put here do not have to be logical tests. But if you are going to use a custom formula, the custom formula has to be a logical test. But any formula that you use anywhere else doesn't have to be a logical test. I would like to have to do this, but I think time is gone. It's 18 minutes past 5. So we have to do part 2 for this data validation.